Hello, I'm senior law editor Liane Jackson, and today I am joined by renowned civil rights attorney Benjamin Crump, who is also one of our Forbes top 200 lawyers in the United States. So I'm happy to have him joining us. Of course, today we are talking about an extremely tragic incident. Um, last night, a verdict came down against three officers who were charged in the case of Tyre Nichols in Memphis in his beating death after a traffic stop. They were convicted on certain counts. It was a mixed verdict, and I want to bring in Attorney Crump to talk a little bit about whether this was considered a win. They were not convicted on some of the more serious civil rights charges, but a lot of times people take what they can get when it comes to police brutality. Thank you for joining me, Mr. Crump, first of all.
Thank you for having me, Liane, and thank you for covering this important matter, especially on behalf of Tyre Nichols' family.
Yeah, this has been well, it's been 1 year. It hasn't been as long as some of these cases can drag out. So actually, they have gotten what many would consider some form of justice. This happened in January 2023, 29-year-old Tyre Nichols being pulled out of a car. A number of police officers, five were there, some EMT workers. And just if you could just walk us through a little bit of what happened and who's involved, who was involved, who's been convicted. I know a couple of the police officers also have pled in this situation.
Yeah, Tyre Nichols' mother and father and their family are very grateful that the jury returned guilty verdicts on charges of all five of the police officers that were charged in the beaten death, the brutal beaten death of Tyre Nichols. It is one of the most heartbreaking videos of police brutality ever because it's so senseless. Tyre is asking them, what did I do wrong, while they're plummeting him? And at one point, he just says, can I just go home? I mean, he was less than 100 yards from his home, from where his mother and father was there waiting for him, and he never made it home because of the punches, the kicks. I mean, the denial of medical assistance, the denial of humanity. And that's why we're here. After the video came out, because it was captured on a poll camera video, and it came out and people were speechless. President Biden had his parents at the State of the Union address to say that this is beyond the pale for even what we as Americans have become accustomed to with police brutality and excessive force on people of color, especially Black people. And so finally, you had the federal trial brought by Christian Clark, who is head of the Civil Rights Division of the Department of Justice, and their assistant U.S. attorneys in Memphis, Tennessee, is where they had the week-and-a-half-long trial, and two of the officers pled guilty. That was Martin and Mills, and then Haley was also found guilty of violating Tyre Nichols' civil rights. And then the other two officers were found guilty of conspiracy. And it's very important when you think about the conspiracy claim, because the conspiracy claim allows for all of the officers to be in prison for up to 20 years. And that dealt with them conspiring, lying, falsifying police reports, because their police reports were completely contradicted by the video once it was released. And so you had this Scorpion unit, this special ops unit that seemed to be trained on violating the constitutional rights of Black people in a certain part of town in Memphis, Tennessee. And there was compelling, riveting testimony that this policy, these actions that you saw Tyre Nichols suffer, were condoned all the way to the top. So the verdict, they say a mixed verdict. I think it was, as his parents said, a good verdict. All of them was taken into custody. All of them were convicted of the federal charges. They still have state charges pending for second-degree murder. And when you think about what the jury did, they found that Martin, who everybody agreed was the most culpable, he punished him the most. And then you had Mills and Haley, who also was very active in the beatdown per se. And they all have guilty convictions for actions. And then you have the other two officers who the jury found were involved. They were holding their legs, his arms, but wasn't punching as much. And they lied on the police report, and all of them failed to intervene. We can hear these individuals say, well, they were just bad apples. Well, the question is, where are the good apples who say something when they see the bad apples violate the constitutional rights of citizens? And that was clearly on display here with Tyre Nichols, just like it was on display with George Floyd killing. You had officers who saw their fellow officers doing reprehensible things, but yet they didn't intervene. And so I think this jury set a verdict that would send a message to officers that if you sit idly by and are complicit, then you're part of the problem.
Well, that code of silence that's in many police departments is almost as big a problem as the bad apples, because of course, then it gives good police officers a bad name. And being able to stand up in cases like these and do something, intervention to intervene, you don't see that enough. And so you're hoping, the family's hoping that this does send a message to others in the police force. Because in this case, it was a traffic stop, which is how many of these police brutality cases often begin. And then can you describe a little bit about, I guess there was the run tax. Well, first there was excessive force allegedly from the beginning when they pulled him out of his car for almost running a red light, I believe is what happened, or speeding towards a red light. This is a 29-year-old FedEx worker, not, as you mentioned, not far from his mother's house. But he did end up running as they were brutalizing him on the ground. He got up and ran. Then because of the running, they had to chase him. And then there's a description of sort of like, well, if you flee, that's when we really engage in brutality. Can you describe a little bit? It's like some of the officers involved testified against their colleagues. Is this something that was common with this Scorpion group, but not, maybe something that you see in other, you deal with this all over the country? Is this something you also see in other police departments?
Well, it certainly seems to be this notion that if you don't comply with my command, then I can engage whatever excessive force I deem appropriate. We just saw it with Tyreek Hill down in Miami, and that terrible
The football player, the Miami Dolphins, I believe.
football player for the Miami Dolphins, star wide receiver. I mean, snatched out his car a lot like Tyree, and then they made him put his face down in the hot concrete in handcuffs with hundreds of people looking on for a speeding ticket. And that's what you see here with Tyree. It was an alleged traffic violation, even though we don't see video of any of the traffic violations. But at worst, it was a traffic violation. It should not end with a death sentence. And what was Tyre Nichols to do? I mean, he was getting beat down. He was being brutally beaten. And so he was able to break away. He ran. And for that there, you say, oh, we really going to beat you down now. And you see it escalates when they catch him. And that's what some of the police officers in Memphis said, we have a run tax. This run tax, if you run, we tax you. And we tax you severely. And it is what we believe a culture and a unwritten policy that was condoned to the very top of the Memphis Police Department. And that's why I think this verdict was important, that all of them was found guilty of some charges. And all of them were taken into custody. All of them went to jail. That's what Tyre Nichols' mother, Robin Wells, and Rodney Wells, his father, had been praying for, that nobody gets away scot-free.
Yeah, they all were found guilty of, I believe it was obstruction or one found guilty of conspiracy to witness tamper. As you mentioned, a lot of they initially falsified reports, which unfortunately in many police departments, in many instances, happens. But when these cases come to light, there's often video that contradicts what the official line is and what everyone, again, the code of silence, what other colleagues and coworkers fall in line with other officers to agree that this is what happened. And it wasn't what the victims are saying. But in this case, the sentencing is scheduled, it's for January. And of course, they also are facing state murder charges. What do you hope will happen coming out of this? You also have a civil case, but what do you hope can happen in terms of sentencing? The federal government is also investigating the Memphis Police Department. They may come under some sort of consent decree. What do you hope will happen?
Well, Liane, my hope is that we will see equal justice for Tyre Nichols. And that is, whatever the judge would have sentenced Tyre Nichols, this young Black man, had he beat down and brutally engaged in excessive force against a police officer, what would have been his sentence? Well, we want the exact same sentence. We don't think that you should be treated special or have preferential treatment because you have a gun and a badge. No, what our community wants to see is equal justice under the law. Don't treat them with any more consideration than you treat our young Black and brown brothers and sisters every day of the week. So that's what we expect to see in sentencing. And the state attorney, the elected district attorney there in Memphis, has already told the family and my legal team that if the federal court does not sentence them appropriately, then we're waiting and ready to go forward with our state charges of second-degree murder and lesser included charges. And so the family is very relieved that Tyre Nichols' death isn't being swept under the rug, that we're going to continue the fight until we can get full justice. That is, convictions in the felony case, convictions in the state case, as well as accountability in the civil action for his son, who is now going to grow up without his father.
And you filed a $550 million civil rights case. What's the status of that?
Well, we certainly plan on sending a message, because these officers, I mean, it seemed like had Tyre not died, this would have been business as usual. And we have several other Black citizens come forward and say, they did it to me too. And so we are operating under that premise that what we see on that video was not an independent act. It was part of a pattern of violations of constitutional rights of citizens, especially citizens of color. And so right now, the matter had been stayed pending the criminal case, but the judge let us do what we call discovery, and we were working up the case in anticipation that the criminal matter would be completed. Therefore, we could then go forward with our civil matter with no delay. And so he's been allowing us to do discovery and take depositions of everybody except the officers, because they have their rights against self-incrimination. And when you look at this video, it's hard to not see self-incrimination just on the video alone.
Right. There's no way of getting around what the video shows, and it is horrific. And this is going to be a long haul in terms of changing the culture of police. The idea of the badge creates impunity to basically get away with whatever you want, brutality, falsifying reports, and treating mostly Black citizens and people of color in a different way, and in a brutal, often in a brutal way. So I appreciate all the work you are doing in this area, and I really appreciate you joining us today as well.
Thank you so much, Liane, and to Forbes for covering these important matters. It really matters when we give a story like a Tyre Nichols the attention that is so richly deserved. So thank you, and we keep fighting for justice for Tyre and all of the others.
Thank you. And we will continue shining a light on these very important stories and the work you're doing. So I hope you will join us again soon.
I look forward to it. Thank you.